Has anyone ever told you about the Tempest Necro? That's 4 active Bone Storms right now pummeling our opponent. That's essentially what's happening to them. And the best part, you can zoom through the whole dungeon while all of these Bone Storms are constantly active. How is this even possible? With a new Necro unique, the Lidless Wall, which gives you, whenever a Bone Storm is active, damage outside of the Bone Storm can trigger with a 100% lucky hit on a high roll another Bone Storm. That can be 4 more Bone Storms, so in total with your own ones, 5. And the good thing is, every Bone Storm lasts 10 seconds. But now there's something I misunderstood about the Lidless Wall. It says, whenever a Bone Storm is active. That means if your own personal Bone Storm around yourself goes away, but you still have a Bone Storm somewhere on the map going on, you can keep triggering more Bone Storms. Let me show you instead of explaining and then break down the whole build. It's an absolute mental dungeon pusher. The best part, it's not using the Barber heart. It actually gets worse with the Barber heart. Let's take a tier 61 dungeon, Hoarfrost Demise, Death Pulse. Oh, I do hate Death Pulse, but hey, we'll make it work. The whole getup is similar to Infinity Mist. What we're going to do is activate Bone Storm, go in with Blood Mist, have our cooldowns reduced with Decrepify Aura that you can't see yet, and also use our Blight to actually on range make even more Bone Storms. So we activate it, we just go through. Like you can see, I throw in, there's another Bone Storm already made, and we're just going in with this. Our Corpse Tendrils will trigger and make more Bone Storms. See, there's a Bone Storm running right now, killing all of these. We go on again. Every Bone Storm we trigger is 10 seconds. Now that there's another 10 seconds, there's another Bone Storm going on, killing everyone. You just keep moving, right? Hit them once, make another Bone Storm, just going on. We could trigger our actual Bone Storm, but I don't want to do that because right now, if I trigger my actual Bone Storm, oops, we died. If I trigger my actual Bone Storm, there would be one around me, but we don't want one around me. Because if I have one around me, I can't make more Bone Storms with my other damage. So as long as there's one Bone Storm on the map, you only use your Bone Storm on yourself to actually kill a bunch of elite packs. So if we really need to kill another elite pack, if we really need to do some crazy bonus damage, then you could do that. But most of the time, you really don't need it, as you can see here. And we're just, that's a triple stack of Bone Storms just going around right now. We can back out of this because there is running. We should try to create one here. So we just have a backup Bone Storm. Again, reset the 10-second timer. Now I'm with here without Bone Storm. Reap 1, 2 to actually restore essence. Do some more. It's a double Bone Storm running here. You notice, like you could just keep them up. I can also on range hit to reset the 10-second timer. That's the most important part, right? Reset the 10-second timer. Reset the 10-second timer here as well. Get things up. There's a Bone Storm running, Decrepify Aura on, and go back into the Blood Mist. Have a triple stack of Bone Storms running here right now that will just tear this guy apart. We want to focus on the elite because he's a little bit of vampiric. We can also just spam him down with Blight because Blight does insane damage. 4 Bone Storms going on. For the next pack of elites, go through them while we trigger another X Bone Storms. Spam them, 2 more on them. Cooldown reset. You can see the build is an absolute joy to play. Skill breakdown. It looks a little bit like Infinity Mist, but it plays way faster and better. You have Reap into Acolyte's Reap to make always the corpse because against single targets you might want the corpses. And then we have Blight into Supernatural Blight for the 15 times damage increase for yourself and while your minions don't exist. Then the 4 points and Sever, ignore them. It's just my gloves. We have Hued Flesh with making corpses because you want as many corpses as possible. Since Corpse Explosion is kind of one of your main damages, that's what we also have the Sacrilegious Hearts for, and you want a Blighted Corpse Explosion plus Blood Mist as Ghastly Blood Mist and Fueled by Death. Then down here, you do still see Iron Maiden. That can actually go completely away because we're not using Iron Maiden anymore. I found a better way. But we still have Decrepify going on with the Abhorrent Decrepify for the cooldown reduction. That one bonus point, by the way, can either go for another 4% attack speed bonus, or you could actually put it into Grim Harvest to get 4 essence for corpse consumption. That works very good against bosses. Then we're stacking all the shadow damage up, and we also have our corpse tendrils make vulnerable, plus 1 point into necrotic carapace for the Fortify, and very important, obviously, the Bone Storm. And the good thing is with the Supreme Bone Storm and the Prime Bone Storm, as you're running through the dungeon, it doesn't stack, so you're not getting X times 20% critical strike chance. But as long as a Bone Storm is active, yes, and you've seen the Bone Storm is consistently, constantly active. I have the damage reduction going on, so I get 15% damage reduction, and I do also get the critical strike chance. So constantly throughout the whole dungeon, every single second of the whole dungeon, bonus critical strike chance, bonus damage reduction. And then Shadow Blind last but not least. And why so much Shadow? Well, that's because we actually turned Bone Storm into a Shadow skill. That is because it just triggers so extremely good with infinite Shadow Blinds and all the other Shadow scaling instead of actually being Bone. Now for the Book of the Dead, we sacrifice Skeletal Reapers for more Shadow damage, Skeletal Mages for more vulnerable damage, and Golem for more critical strike chance. Which leads us to a Shadow Bone Storm just slaps people silly from the left and the right. Most important centerpiece is the Litless Wall, and you want it at least with a 20% roll. Because a 20% roll gives you a 95% chance, a 25% roll gives you a 100% chance. But you really want that 20% roll. I think 15 would be okay as well. That would be at least a 90% chance to trigger. The rest of the stats don't really matter. I mean, attack speed high roll would be good. Damage to distant enemies high roll would be nice. But you know what? Screw this. This is not what we're actually looking at. Again, turn your Bone Storm into Shadow. Have your Corpse Tendrils higher your critical strike, chance, and damage because they consistently trigger, and that's how your Shadow Blight key passive, which can critical strike, and your Bone Storm turn into your main damage sources. That gets followed up by the Blighted Rattling Bones Wand with a 120% increased damage for 6 seconds after the Shadow Blight key passive damages enemy 10 times. And you can imagine that you constantly have this bonus damage up. You just have it up. It's just there because your Bone Storms, Shadow Bone Storms, consistently trigger Shadow Blind. We need the Blood Mist Corpse Explosion for the cooldown. We have Blood Mist Leave Behind a Trail of Shadows as well for more Shadow Blind procs, for more key passive procs, for more damage. Disobedience for the bonus armor, so in case I get out of the Blood Mist, I don't get blasted. And also Bone Storm makes a barrier, and yes, all the Bone Storms constantly make barriers. So as you're zooming through the dungeons, spreading Bone Storms throughout the dungeons, have minions stay alive for a wee bit before they die. You constantly have a big barrier up. I mean, it's off your base life and not off your total life, but that honestly doesn't matter because your base life is high enough and it just consistently gives you a goddamn good barrier that soaks up damage. And even if it gets blasted, it comes back, gets blasted, comes back, gets blasted, comes back. Now for your second ring, and yes, you see, I still have the Decrepify on. There's another choice that is way better. There's two choices you can go for. That is the Aspect of Decay. So you would stack your Shadow Blight key passive to do 200% more damage, or you would swap the Aspect of Decay for increased multiplicative damage while Barrier is active. And you've noticed I always have Barrier active. So we're either getting a 25% multiplier on all our damage, Bone Storm damage, Corpse Explosion damage, whatsoever, or you would stack your Shadow Blight key passive up to have that also do more damage. That's a little bit choose your poison. I have to say, I personally enjoy the Conceited Aspect more because it's permanently up in this build, while the Shadow Blight key passive only affects this one, and this affects all of your damage, all of your Bone Storms, everything. And your Bone Storm is significant parts of your damage. Now hearts and item stats. First, we take the Decrepify Aura Heart. 4, we're up to 1 or 0, whichever you found already. Then Sacrilegious for the auto casting on the corpse skills, so you get permanently corpse tendrils over and over and over again. But also you trigger corpse explosions that you do actually have time to shoot the blight out. Blight works extremely well against single targets and bosses to just amplify that bonus damage, and also on range to hit those Bone Storms bonus. So activate your Bone Storm, dash away from the boss, hit him with 2 blights, get even more Bone Storms, hurt him a lot. We're using the Creeping Death, which only works for your damage over time effects, but it still does 41% up to 50% bonus multiplicative damage for each different crowd control effect. You have Slow and Stun, but you could also add Immobilize on your Blight instead of having the 15% shadow damage increase. So it might be nice to actually swap that and then add another one for another 50% bonus. And Unstoppable or Staggered Monsters take 142% multiplicative increased damage from your damage over time effects, which is your Blight and your Shadow Blight. Both of them get a huge boost from this, making this incredibly nice together with the Shadow Blight key passive stacker for 120% multiplicative. Just really ramp up that damage and fly over your opponents. Now for item stats, I've been actually using my maximum minion life equipment, which is kind of weird, right? But my chest, for example, is perfect. Maximum life, darkness skill damage, total armor, and damage reduction from enemies that are affected by shadow damage over time. That's kind of perfect on all your defensive gear. Also, for my wand, or you could be taking a sword, dagger. Critical strike damage, intelligence, vulnerable damage, and all stats. You could take core skill damage for the blind, but it's not really needed. Or alternatively, ultimate skill damage on things. I don't have ultimate skill damage on anything right now. I have lucky hit chance, critical strike chance, maximum life shadow damage. I have critical strike chance, critical strike damage, and damage to close. Maximum life works perfectly. And on the boots, they're just stat boots. By the way, I forgot to mention the leg aspect because that one is a free one right now. Yes, I still have the hardened bones on because I didn't need another defensive aspect. So what you could take here could be aspect of the deflecting barrier. 13% chance to ignore incoming direct damage from distant enemies. Sure, why not? You could also put on the aspect of might to actually have a 20% damage reduction as you use your basic skill for 6 seconds. As you move into your opponents, reap a single time and just get a nice 20% damage reduction on top bonus. Technically, if you want to take it to the next level, the chest could also take the explosive mist from the boots. The pants could take the disobedience from the chest, and then the boots are left over. And you know, there are these unique boots that put a trail of frost behind you. So we could add freeze to this build for another 50% multiplicative damage with our hard. Interesting thought. Paragon Board. We're starting with damage into the control glyph for the 20% multiplicative from stunned or frozen enemies, which brings us back to the freeze boost as well. And as you can see here, the notes that are glowing, this is just the bonus notes you could technically take for even more intelligence. I've taken most intelligence notes here, go over armor and more damage. The first board you go into is the Scent of Death board for critical strike damage and critical strike damage, because that's still our most damage, critical strike damage with Shadow Blight and also with the Bone Storm pummeling them critical strike wise. That's even more critical strike damage. We have the Exploit glyph, which enhances our damage versus vulnerable enemies, which we constantly have going on for armor and also damage versus injured, into the Wither board. And in the Wither board, we almost take everything. Shadow damage over time, Darkness glyph with 44 willpower stacks, damage versus elites, more damage reduction from shadow dot damage affected, damage over time, and also the legendary node Wither. And here, keep in mind that as you're going through this Paragon board, you're going to try to get willpower nodes wherever you can. For example, you notice this right here. It would be better to go over the willpower node instead of over the intelligence nodes, because we need more willpower than intelligence. Also here, it took a path over to int, so we could go over the willpower. There's a little bit of optimization still available. Here, instead of going over the dex, we could go over the willpower too. You want as much willpower as possible, as we're also traveling into the Flesh Eater board for the 40% multiplicative with a lot of dexterity for the Essence glyph to increase your critical strike damage. And also critical strikes against not healthy enemies, 22% multiplicative increase. And then we're going into the Bloodbath board without taking Bloodbath because we don't overpower. But we can take here the Imbiber glyph for damage while healthy, and we're constantly healthy, as we also get bonus healing received and damage while fortified, a little bit bonus. But it's just for a huge increase of damage while healthy, as you want to just have that multiplier going on. Tell me how this goes for you as you have the Litless Wall already. And yes, until you have the Litless Wall, you can essentially play the Infinimist. Yes, there you go with the Infinimist. Or if you're not interested in the Storm build, how about the new Mendel Summoner that already cleared the tier 100 dungeon at level 85?